Hello everyone. I wanted to make a quick video about the playoffs and the formatting because it's been a pretty contentious topic ever since it happened yesterday on the post show, and we finally got to look at what the seeding is, what the teams look like, and what we should expect for these playoffs of the potentially final Overwatch League season of all time. It's going to be in Toronto. So let's sort of break everything down. I'll explain it all for you, and we can talk about some of the issues that a lot of people are bringing up. Let me preface this as well, because I think there's a lot of people upset, but we need to be realistic with where we are as a league. The Overwatch League is potentially dying. This is potentially the last year. So coming in and being like, why don't we have a 12-team format or the 16-team format or like a 3-week event or a 2-week event? That's just unrealistic with where we are. You know, we're going to have a small event. It's being run by the Toronto Defiant, essentially, and they didn't even make it to their own playoffs, sadly. So there are limitations that we're working within, and that is going to make, you know, sort of some issues with the bracketing and how things are going to be, but that's not really what I'm going to be highlighting. I want to be highlighting the things that could easily be fixable or decisions that were made that just made this whole thing more complicated and confusing, which led to why everyone is very upset. So let's just have a look at the bracket to start with. This is the bracket for the postseason of the Overwatch League 2023. First off, I've been in esports for 10 years. I've been watching for a long time. I've watched a lot of different esports. And one thing that is a really big problem is when you show a bracket like this and it's not instantly clear what you're looking at or how to decipher it, that's a problem. You know, the casual viewer needs to be able to look at this and at least make some sense of it without understanding what GSL groups are or what everything is or all those types of things, because we have some lines that are connecting and some that aren't. So I did some master craftsman on Paint to really explain and break down how this could be explained in a better way. If you just break the graphic in half, it makes more sense. So there are only 8 teams in the playoffs. And the way that it's essentially working is in the first half of the playoffs, we are having 2 4-team GSL-style groups. How that essentially means is exactly the way this bracket is presented, okay? We have 4 teams. If you win twice, you make it out. And you go into to further into the playoffs, okay? So it is essentially like a mini double elimination bracket, and that's why this graphic is useful to look at. Personally, I believe it should have been presented in a way that if you explain it as GSL groups or just call it group stage, people would understand a little bit more of like, hey, there are 2 groups of 4. The teams are choosing who is going to be in their group, and then 2 teams will make it out of that group, and then they will go, you go to the right side of the graphic, to a 4-team single elimination bracket. That's essentially what is here on the right. The 4 teams will come out of the groups. 1 from each group will play the other of each group, depending on the seeding, and then they'll all play. Winner wins it all, okay? That makes way more sense, and I think that would have clarified a lot of the confusion around the formatting if they had just presented it in this way. I understand it's not one graphic, but the one graphic confused more than it helped in a lot of regards, in my opinion. I looked at this and I was like, why do the lines not line up all of a sudden? Why is there no longer a loser's bracket coming through the bottom? Why is it not just double elimination to begin with, right? And I want to go further as well and be like, this isn't an uncommon format by any regards. VCT Champions that just happened recently, great event. They did pretty much the same thing. They had 16 teams, but they had 4 groups of 4, where 2 teams made it out of a GSL style bracket. This is essentially what we were looking at on our graphic as well. And then they shot that into a double elimination bracket, which is obviously ideal. But as I said, we're working with the limitations of what we have. We don't have crazy money like Riot does or throwing money at a lot of the events that they're running. So going into a single elimination bracket isn't the worst thing in the world, okay? Because single elimination is a pretty common thing throughout the history of esports. It removes the problem that I think some people have a problem with, where when you go through a double elimination bracket, when you get to the very end, if you're the winning team, you don't get 2 chances. If you make it all the way to the grand finals without losing a match, you don't get your second chance, okay? Everyone else gets a second chance in a double elimination bracket. You don't. I think that's kind of fine. Obviously, it's not ideal, but you get to play less matches if you go through the winner's bracket. You get to see more of your opponents. You get more breaks. Plus, you're in the grand finals. If you lose in the grand finals, you lose in the grand finals, right? That's what it's all for. That's where the highest level of competition should come in. I understand that can be a little frustrating, but I think that's nowhere near as big as the problem as we're going to see right here. And one of the big reasons I had a frustration with this bracket is teams will get a second chance at the front half of the tournament, but not at the back half of the tournament. So let's do a thought experiment. If Atlanta Reign wins both of their matches, they beat the Spark and then beat Boston or London, right? It's anticipated, right? They make it through to this match one in the semifinals. Let's say Houston make it through and then Houston beat Atlanta, right? Atlanta doesn't get another chance. Atlanta goes to the third place match, and we'll talk about the third place match a little bit. But some teams are getting second chances and then people aren't later. And I think that's a little frustrating when you only have 4 teams in the single elim. Yes, it's not the worst thing in the world, similar to what I was talking about with the going through the winners bracket, but it just seems weird when we've done double elimination in the past and it has been incredibly successful. Solomon, our producer at Platchat, made a great graphic pretty simply, and he said, you know what else has 14 matches, exactly like we're going to have at Toronto? A double elimination bracket. So why was this format not just chosen and run with to go through? Because I think that would have made everything a little bit easier, you know, and we've done this in the past. I think we did an 8-team mid-season madness bracket last year, and it was bonkers and it was banging, and there was so many great storylines. Every match felt like it mattered. There were, you know, teams made their runs through the lower brackets. Some teams fell early. Some teams just went through the winners bracket, right? There is advantages to why people do double elimination brackets. On top of this, the way that this is done and why I don't like single elimination in Overwatch League is there's going to be a third place match. And I think third place matches are just incredibly boring. I think a lot of people can agree, because on the final day where everything is the most hyped, you want every match to matter, probably directly before we have the grand finals, we're going to have a third place match. And the problem with the third place match is neither of the teams are playing to move forward. Neither of them are playing for, you know, to win it all. They're literally just playing for money, because no one cares who comes third or fourth. Let's be realistic. Who came third or fourth last year? Don't really remember. Who came third or fourth the year before that? Don't really remember. Yeah, it is in the history books and it can matter a little bit, but it doesn't really matter that much. So essentially what you're paying for is money. And this season, the teams are going to be playing for $95,000 difference between third and fourth place. So it matters to the players, who are going to make a good chunk of change, or the organization, who are going to get a little bit of extra money. But overall, I think it's just not a fun experience. You know, like no one's going to be excited for this third place match. And honestly, there's more likely to be trolling in it than anything else. So that is also another issue that I think runs into. On top of that, the way that the days are going to work is it's going to be, instead of having a similar-ish number of days or matches per day, we're going to go 4-4-2-4. If the math makes sense and, you know, what I've been explained to me, because we'll play the first 4 matches on the first day. Then we'll play the bracket 1, match 4 for both sides. And then we'll play this losers match on the second day, right? So that's 4 more matches. But then on the third day, which you wanted to progressively get more hype, we're only going to have 2 elimination matches, which is these match 5s. And then on the last day, we'll have the semifinals, the third place match, and then the grand finals. So it's going to feel a little jarring going from 4-4 to 2, then back to 4. It feels a little weird. And as you said, it's not the worst thing in the world. This event's still going to be great, but it's just these little things just kind of irk at me that it's going to kind of remove some of the hype that we really want to have for the final playoffs ever. So let's talk about the other elephant in the room, which is the seeding of how everything happened, how this bracket came to be, because I think this is Leave sort of making a post online, and he said, we just woke up, and what seed number are we? And I think almost everybody can agree to this. No one knows who is the number 1 seed. Even the Soul Infernal GM, who was on the broadcast to sort of choose their team, wasn't aware why they were number 1 seed. Wasn't really clear. It wasn't really identified. And it just wasn't understandable for anyone. Even the desk was confused as we were working it through. So then we had the seeding. And I have no problem with an APAC team being a number 1 seed and being on the opposite side of the Atlanta Reign, who was the number 1 seed from the West. It's impossible to differentiate between the West and the East because we can't be subjective and be like, well, Florida Mayhem is better than the East, or Houston Outlaws are better than the East. That's subjective. And when we don't have formats that line up with each other where you can say, oh, this team had a better record than all the teams in the East, so therefore 2 West teams should be on the other side of the bracket, because we did all this contender shenanigans, because the formats were so different, this is just the way it is. It's just weird that that's how the seeding worked and it wasn't clear for anybody. So then you pair that with, I don't know why for this group, groups that the teams were seeding for, why you're picking the team to be in the other group. I've heard that it is somewhat common in esports. I haven't seen it that much. I think I would always rather see a team pick who they want to be in their group, because I think that creates rivalries and storylines of teams picking who they believe is a weaker opponent. And I think it just makes it more fun and less confusing, because now Soul Infernal picking London Spitfire as their first team, a team that barely made it in, onto the other side of the group, has led to this massive stacking of the bottom half of the group. We got Dallas Fuel, Soul Infernal, Outlaws, and Mayhem. It's just like, whoa, how did we end up here? Like, why does this make sense? Did Soul Infernal know they were picking for the other side of the group? Are they just that afraid of the Chatty Reinhardt and the London Spitfire? Like, I guess it makes sense, but I would definitely hedge my bets against the new meta against the London Spitfire than I would against the Houston Outlaws, the Florida Mayhem right now. But that just also was another confusing thing. The selection ceremony was kind of confusing in its own right. And that sort of, I think, highlights a lot of the issues that I'm trying to highlight in this video. It's just these little things that made everything confusing, makes it completely unaware, and it makes it just hard for the casual viewer to sort of get into it, understand that this is when the playoffs is happening, this is what I should expect, which then takes away some of the hype. And I feel like we're getting so much negativity rather than hype for these playoffs, because regardless of what the formatting is, regardless of everything else, the playoffs is going to be hype. We're going to have an awesome playoffs and grand finals in Toronto. The event's going to be lit. I'm excited to see all the fans. I'm sure the best teams will probably make it out of it, and we'll see some banging matches. So that doesn't matter. All the formatting at this point, it doesn't matter that much. One last gripe I want to highlight before I move on. I don't understand why we haven't heard about the patch from any official channels. We haven't heard from the Overwatch League. We haven't heard from like Sean Miller, who's done some announcements in the past. We didn't hear about it on the desk. We haven't been told what patch we're playing in the playoffs. I was willing to sort of be like, well, maybe they want to announce it when they finalize the bracket or when they do this selection ceremony, but we didn't hear that yesterday either. We still don't really know what patch we have. The only thing we are really going off of right now is Liz Richardson, who says, I've confirmed directly with the source in the Overwatch League that the playoff games will be played on September 7th, Overwatch 2 patch, which is the Zarya patch. And that's why we've all been expecting Zarya to be in the playoffs. Teams alluded to it, players alluded to it. Everyone's just assumed it's true. I just don't know why it hasn't been confirmed at this point. It just kind of makes it hard to generate hype as someone who is trying to make videos, hype these things up, talk about it, sort of prepare. I'm on Plat Chat. It's very difficult when you don't know what the meta is going to be and can't say with certainty what the meta is going to be. Pair that with the shenanigans that teams might be just signing contenders players and like players just for this patch, for the finals that might change the way everything is played out. It just feels a little weird all round. So I hope this sort of explained things a little bit better for those that were still a little bit confused or trying to understand it. I really want to reiterate my point that at the end of the day, it's going to be a great event. This formatting and this stuff, it's easy and fun to be negative or just sort of bash on these types of things. I don't want this to be a piece that's considered like I'm bashing everything that happened. I just wanted to highlight some of the issues that I think could arise and mistakes that could potentially have been avoided for our final playoffs. This potentially might be the last time we have the Overwatch League, and it feels like a lot of simple mistakes were made. So hopefully there is a world in which potential changes could happen. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but regardless, it's going to be a great event. I will be there. I'll be casting. I hope to see all of you guys there. Hope to see you guys in chat. There's a Mercy skin that's going to be dropping, so there's probably going to be 1 million people watching, so it's going to be fun. and let's hope Overwatch League goes out with a bang. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.